Should you delay Social Security and raid your IRA? Part 2. Last week, Tony and I did a show on how the math works when it comes to claiming Social Security early versus delaying. And I did a very specific scenario, yet there were still questions, phone calls, comments on the YouTube channel and on the podcast that require me to revisit this and go in more detail, even more detail. Let me bring in my co-host, Tony. You remember what we talked about last week, how, it makes sense to delay Social Security and completely destroy your IRA.
Yeah.
But the big thing was watching your IRA account go down while you're waiting. It's very difficult for people, and the comments of the video prove that. So let's revisit. And if you're just tuning in for the first time, let me revisit this scenario that we're going to get deep into.
Sure.
And what I'm going to do, Tony, for the viewers, I'm going to share my screen and show my financial planning software.
Yeah. But for our podcast listeners out there, don't worry, you're not missing much. Usually Dan accidentally shows pictures of his family vacation with him on the beach in a Speedo. So you don't want that. For our listeners who can't see the video, you're not missing anything. No.
Okay.
I'm kidding.
So you
got comments though last week. I mean, when you talk about these things, I love the fact that it generates a lot of people have a lot of opinions on Social Security and these strategies. It's always funny how whenever you talk about this and say, hey, here's a strategy, people are like, oh my goodness, I filed at 62. You have to do what I did, right?
That's it. There's always people, like I always say, people watch the video and they are looking for someone to validate their strategy.
Right.
And when they hear someone say something that's completely opposite of what they're doing, they take offense or they feel like they should defend and attack.
Sure.
My strategy. But
I think it's human nature to want to be validated. And I don't fault them for that, but I do think they have to understand if they're an individual who hasn't worked as a financial professional their whole lives and don't have software that runs 20,000 calculations and consider everybody's different, right?
Well, once you get into it, life happens. And even if the math says one thing, a lot of times we do something different just based on the situation.
Yep, so life happens.
Again, though, we have to be specific on this situation because otherwise it just, you're going to be all over the map. And that's what my past shows were. Here are the things to consider. But let's talk specifically about this scenario. And let me show you on the software exactly what I mean by what I said in the last show. So age 65 and retiring. So they're not going back to work and they have $300,000 saved in an IRA. That's it. That's all the money they have and they have no other income. And they're making the decision. Do I turn Social Security on now or do I delay for the future? Now they take the $300,000 in the IRA and they invest it and they're getting 3.89%. That's what I'm showing in my scenario. Okay. Why that number? Well, because again, can you get more than that right now? Late 2024? Yes. But for how long? And you're going to be investing this. You're going to be spending it. It's going to be tricky. So just to keep things real and safe, I'm saying about a 4% return. They need $3,500 a month to live. So all they got is Social Security and their IRA. They need $3,500 a month to live. Again, you might be saying, I need more than that. That's not the point. And their Social Security PIA, primary insurance amount, meaning what they would get at their full retirement age of age 67 is $2,600. So right off the bat, you look and say they're going to get $2,600 if they take it at 67. They're 65 and they need $3,500. We got a problem, Houston, right? We're already $900 short a month.
Right.
Even if they waited until their full retirement age. We're going to also assume they're living their average life expectancy and that they're single. So there's no other drama associated with having a spouse to worry about. And we're not going to be dying early. So that changes the math as well. All right. So in this scenario, drawing down their IRA early and delaying Social Security makes more sense than, makes less sense than, drawing down your IRA early to delay Social Security makes more sense than taking Social Security immediately. And I want to show you why that's the case. So I'm going to share my software. It's called Right Capital. I'm not promoting them. I don't get paid to do this. This is one of the software companies that I use when I'm doing financial planning. So you could see my screen, Tony. For those that you are listening, I'm sorry, but I'll try and say it out loud so you see. The probability of success is 3% in this scenario. But again, I'll get to what that means in a moment. So again, scenario is they're 64, they're going to be 65. They're taking in January, they need $3,500 a month, and they're taking Social Security as early as possible, meaning they're taking it now, right? So what does that mean? Cash flow wise, I'm going to skip over to a cash flow statement. Okay. This means that if they take it now, they're going to get about $26,000 a year from Social Security. And that goes up for the rest of their life with the Social Security cost of living, which is included in here. So their income is set. They've locked in their rate, and they got that income for life all the way to however long they live, say 90. Their expenses are $42,000 a year. That's what we said their expenses are, and those go up every year for the rest of their life because life, right?
Inflation. Yeah.
So they're immediately $17,000, $18,000, $19,000 short between what they need to live and what Social Security is going to provide them.
Sure.
And that doesn't go away. They're always going to be short because their expenses are going to go up with cost of living, and their Social Security is going to go up with cost of living. So they're always going to be running a deficit for the rest of their lives because they're taking Social Security early. Now, how are they going to pull that off?
And that deficit's going to go up.
That deficit's going to continue to rise.
The amount
slightly.
They need goes up.
It depends on the monthly need, right? And we're not even going to talk about emergencies or any sort of expenses beyond their living, right? So how are they going to pull this off? Well, they have that $300,000. Remember?
Yeah, they're going to pull from their IRA.
After a year, that $300,000 is now $289, $290. Then it goes to $279, then to $267 in year 3, $254. So it goes down, but not dramatically, right? Because what's happening here is they have a deficit. They're making interest on their money, the $300,000. So that's helping. But even with the interest of, say, 4%, they're still needing to take away from their IRA. Eventually, the government's going to force them to take money out of their IRA when they hit 73. But at this point, they're taking from their IRA to live. And it's drawing down their IRA. And it keeps going down. And eventually, they're going to get to the point in their mid-70s where the drawdown is way more than the growth. And it's going to go down to 0 by the time they hit 81. You see that, Tony?
Yeah.
So it looks nice in the beginning because you still got 280, 290, 260, 250. But where's the panic button hit? At what point do they say, oh, no, when they go below 200,000, when they hit 71? Right? I don't know what their panic button is, but I do know that their lifestyle is not sustainable because if we go back to cash flows and we look at their deficit, at age 81, their total inflows, or 82, say, their total inflows are 38,000 from Social Security. That's it. Their expenses are still 64. They're short 25,000. They have nowhere to pull from. What do? What do they do at that point? When you are spending 25,000 more than you're making, and you have no money to pull from in your IRA, what do you do, Tony?
Yeah,
call up Tony.
I called Dan Wendell, but
for a visual for people that are looking at, all right, what does that look like? Here's the chart. Boom, goes straight down. Not straight down, but it goes gradually down until you hit around 80, and then you're out of money on average.
Yeah,
you can gamble a little bit and hope.
Yeah, I mean, and the problem is if you knew, hey, I'm single, I'm definitely going to pass at 75, then taking it early is probably the best possible scenario, but you don't know how long you're going to live unless you have a terminal illness. And even then, some people defy the odds. I mean, my grandfather lived to 101. My dad is 81 and he's still going. I mean, he has cognitive problems, but I mean, physically he's going to be around. And nowadays people live longer and longer. So yeah, I think you have to plan till you're at least 90. And in order to plan until you're 90, the whole, I'm just going to take it when I'm 62. Now, Some people are saying, well, you're using numbers that aren't my numbers.
Well,
what about that, Dan?
But again, like I said, you have to go with the scenario, and this is what I was trying to show. And it is a dramatic scenario. There's no other factors in here, but I'm trying to simplify it to show the point where, hey, look at this. In all scenarios, basically, there's a really, really strong chance you're going to be out of money in your early 80s. And that's not a good thing. People fear running out of money. And I'm not trying to play fearmonger here. I'm saying this is a scenario. 300,000 can easily go. And it's not like you're spending a ton of money. What are you starting at? $46,000 spend a year? That's not a lot.
No.
Now, let's change the scenario to the optimal strategy, what just so happens in this case to be taking it at 70. What does that do? Well, to the visual, you'll see, again, now we're going down much quicker early, but then you see we level off and we don't run out. Let me go back to cash flow to talk real numbers for those that are listening. In the beginning now, so same scenario, you take the 300,000, investing it at around 4%, and you don't touch Social Security until age 70. What does that do to your cash flow? What is your income? Zero. You have no income in those first 5 years. Where are you going to get the money from? Your IRA. So what happens? Well, that first year, you're down 45,000, 50,000, 50,000, 50, and you keep doing that until you turn Social Security on. And then eventually you turn Social Security on and you're making 45, 46,000 a year in Social Security. Your expenses are the same in both scenarios, but here the difference is not as much. You're only short about 1,000, 1,500 later in life. At age 80, your income is 56, 57,000 from Social Security, whereas your expenses are only 60. So you're short $1,300 or so. You're short not that much. So it's painful in that beginning part, but let's look at what happens to the actual IRA. We started with 300,000. Now we're down to 260, then to 220, then to 177. Did you panic yet, Tony? We're down to 131. Okay. We're down to 82.
At 82, I start to panic.
You start to panic. Your 300,000 is now worth 82,000, and you're turning Social Security on next year. You turn on Social Security, and then you start to see your $77,000 IRA balance level off. It goes down slightly, but only by 1,000, only by 1,000 or so, 2,000 maybe. And yeah, that's not great. You're not sitting, at age 80, you're sitting at 55,000 in the bank and the IRA. But remember what's different now in these two scenarios.
Your Social Security is much higher.
Yes.
And every year that cost of living is on a higher amount. So the calculations, a lot of people don't consider that.
Right. Having a larger baseline income from Social Security gives more breathing room to your retirement savings later, if you can accept that initial drop. That's what I said in the last show. And I'm still saying it now in this scenario. See, delaying Social Security leads to a lower chance of running out of money completely. And it's coupled with that higher baseline income. I'll give you the scenarios, Tony. Let me give you the first one here. I wrote it down. All right. Age 70. All right. Would you rather, Tony, at age 70, have 45,000 of income guaranteed from Social Security a year and have 77,000 in your IRA, or so 45,000 a year in income with 77,000 in IRA, or instead at age 70 you have 226,000 in your IRA, but you only have 29,000 of guaranteed income from Social Security. So there's a $16,000 difference that I talked about in guaranteed lifetime income, but you have 226,000 versus 77,000.
Yeah. A lot of people are going to say, I want that money in the bank, but I personally, because I know from talking to you and other financial professionals and from life, from seeing my parents and seeing what happens when they hit their 70s and 80s, I want guaranteed income later in life.
Yeah. In the beginning, you're feeling the pain. You watch that chart go down real quick.
Yeah.
You watched your account go from 300 to 80,000 in 5 years.
Hard. That's hard for people. Yeah.
It's a lot harder than seeing it go from 300 to 290 to 275, right? In that same amount of time.
But I want mailbox money.
You do. you do when it's this tight. When you're in a scenario where, what's the difference between having an extra 100,000 in the bank if you're going to be short 16,000 a year? You could easily do the math and be like, man, that's only going to last me 6 years, 7 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when you're out of money, wouldn't you rather have a higher baseline? So let's fast forward. Would you rather, Tony, at age 80, have, if you delay, 57,000 of income from Social Security at age 80 with 55,000 in assets, or 39,000 of income with 0 assets?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Now we fast forwarded 10 years, and people at 65 might say, I don't even know if I'll be around at 80. At 80, I'm not going to want to do anything. I'm not going to need a lot of income.
You got to plan until 90 nowadays. So many more people are living longer.
And if you have assets, if you have $1 million, it changes everything, right? This is for the $300,000 savings person.
Yeah.
And
which is a lot of people, which is more people than have $1 million saved for retirement.
Right.
That's for sure.
So
we know that.
When you're doing the math, you look at break even, I could do better. It's always people that are saying that have a lot more money. And for those people, we have a different conversation. But for the average Joe out there listening that's single, like, this makes sense. And when you look at it this way, yeah, $55,000 of assets is not a lot from the 300. Wouldn't it be better if you had 3 million, right? But that's not the scenario you're given. So you have to make the right choice early to prevent being 80 and potentially healthy.
Yeah.
And then being without any of that 300,000 and having locked in a lower baseline Social Security income.
A much lower amount. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because now that 16,000 difference in this scenario has grown because of COLA to what? 10, 18,000 now. And that's just going to keep drifting. It's going to be 20,000 later. So, yeah. And, how much money do you need to generate 18,000 a year in interest? You need a lot. This is it, Tony. This is it right here. All those numbers and scenarios and people saying, well, you could do better. I could, what if? The question always comes down to, yeah, you could, but what if it doesn't work? What if your returns aren't there? What if you do live an average life expectancy to 85, which isn't outrageous anymore?
Yeah. I mean, I think you had people say, well, I'd rather take Social Security and leave the money that I would have taken to live on, leave it in my IRA, or leave it and make, get a guaranteed 5%. And they use that word guarantee, which you got to avoid guaranteed returns, talking about that or relying on them, because right now there may be vehicles that give you a guaranteed 5% return, but for a very limited time, like a CD or a MIGA. And we see right now, we've seen over the last year, those terms get shorter and shorter. My dad's bank, it's only like a it's down to 4.7 is their big deal for their CDs, and it's only for 7 months.
Right.
I mean, we're talking the rest of your life. There is no guaranteed return of, and maybe people are just saying the markets, I can make at least 5% returns every year on my money if I leave them in an IRA in the markets. And Dan, you and I know
you can, maybe, but what if you need that to live in this scenario? You do. All of a sudden, when you're taking money out, it doesn't matter what your return is, because eventually you're still spending more than the interest you're going to make.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Granted, if you could make all the money you need to live at a 4% fixed return, you can manage that. But that's not the scenario we're dealing with here. So
no, you're going to need much more money in the bank to be able to live off that interest. That's for sure.
Right. So everyone's scenario is different, and the math changes based on the assets you have. Your spending is also really important, and what else is going on in your life. But I just wanted to bring home this graph to show people, yeah, you can. Which would you rather have in this scenario? And it's a huge, huge decision that you have to make at 65 in this scenario. Now, again,
or at 62.
or 62, right? You could take it at 62. And waiting to 70 is painful, but sometimes that pain makes up for it, and it could be quite a dramatic makeup later. Now, of course, there's always a lot of different scenarios. I'm going to throw one at you, Tony, that will blow this whole thing out of the water. What if there's a home that you own with home equity? What if you use that? What if you own a $300,000 home free and clear? What if you took that money and helped to live? Would that change your Social Security filing decision?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But I'm not going to get into that today.
Right.
I'm not going to because that's a whole different show. There's so many different scenarios that we throw. What if this, right?
HELOC loans and reverse mortgages.
Like, all of a sudden it's like, well, if I do that, then maybe I can delay, or maybe I should take it early because I have the home equity I can use for. Again, everyone's situation is different, but don't knock the idea that that claiming Social Security, delaying it is a bad thing because your situation, the math shows different. Maybe you're right, but maybe you're wrong. Why don't you do the math? Why don't you run the scenarios and run the software? It's easy for me to do, but I can always tweak things to make it more real for your situation. My conclusion doesn't change from last week, Tony. Spending down IRA assets early in order to delay Social Security does make sense for a lot of people. In this scenario, we showed it, how it makes dramatic sense. But it's a personalized decision.
That's
different for everyone. Do the math, run the numbers, do the software analysis, think it through, consider taxes, consider all the other things that go into it, and then make your decision.
Yeah, because the software you're talking about, you input all their personal data and their personal situation, and it does over 20,000 calculations. I mean, I just don't, and there's no reason not to. There's not a charge to have the Social Security maximization report run. I know my wife and I wouldn't file. We're not going to file for Social Security without having. We had one run just for kicks based on some assumptions. Yeah. But when we get closer to 62, right. When you get close to 62 or retirement, when you're going to take Social Security, you got to have that run. You got to talk to a professional who's going to sit down and look at your situation from above. No emotions, no influence from your brother-in-law or the guy down the street, but from a fiduciary. Hey, what's in your best interests? Yeah. And I mean, because there's a lot of people with opinions about Social Security, as we find out every time we do a Social Security show, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Everyone's got the opinion, but who cares? Who cares what they say? Do it for yourself and run your own math. And Tony, by the time you're 70, it'll only be you and your wife and your youngest daughter living with you. And
oh no! Hey, wait a minute. Who's living with me? Oh, Dan, you had to poke. You had to.
No, she'll be out in the world contributing away from you.
Well, Dan, I think to end the show, I just have one thing.
God bless Social Security.
Indeed, Tony. Thanks for a good show. We'll catch everyone next week.
All matters discussed in today's show are for informational purposes only.
This show is not investment advice.
Dan Riddle nor Dolphin Financial Group are affiliated or endorsed by any government agency.
Investment advisory services are offered through Dolphin Wealth Management, Inc., a registered investment advisor in the state of Florida.
Insurance products and services are offered through Dolphin Insurance, Inc.
Dolphin Wealth Management, Inc. and Dolphin Insurance, Inc. are affiliated companies doing businesses as Dolphin Financial Group.
You should talk to someone at Dolphin Financial Group before implementing any of these strategies or ideas.